Hello, I'm J.John and welcome to Facing the Canon. And I'm delighted that today my guest is Bishop David Pytches. David, it's really
Nice to be
great
here.
that you've come and I'm delighted. David, let's kind of journey a little bit through your life.
Oh dear, yes.
You come from a very big family.
Yes, quite a big family, I think, in today's terms. There were 10 children in the family, but I was at the tail end. I was the 9th of the 10. But one died before I was born.
Right. And your father was a clergyman?
Yes, my father was a clergyman, and several generations back have been clergy. I think probably about 14 generations back, but not a direct line down, but in each generation there was a clergyman there, yes.
Would you say that you always knew the Lord?
Well, that was always my problem, because I went into the army and I met people that had very dramatic conversions, and they looked down at me rather sadly because I hadn't had a dramatic conversion. In fact, they didn't think I'd been converted at all, but I knew the Lord, but I hadn't got that kind of experience. Mine was more like some people have a sort of a Damascus Road experience,
Yes.
very dramatic, and some people it's like a creeping dawn, and mine was just, I've always just known the Lord was there.
Yes.
Mm.
Your mother died when you were a teenager.
Yes,
And
she
then
did.
your father died only a few years later.
Yes, when I was about 21 or 20, yes, 21 I think I was.
So
yes.
was that obviously season of your life quite hard? Because I think
Well,
you were 16 when your mother passed
yes.
away.
I mean, my mother had cancer, and sometimes it's a terrible thing to say, but when you see people in suffering, you begin to pray that the Lord would take your own mother, which is a rather difficult situation to be in. But I think, I did pray that he would, not that I wanted to lose my mother.
No, to spare her from the suffering.
Yeah, and of course I knew she'd gone to be with the Lord. And then my youngest sister stayed home to look after us until we'd finished school.
Right.
And then I went into the army, and home more or less broke up after that, as far as I was concerned. Yes.
Did you have a clear call that you should go into the ordained ministry of the Church of England?
Yes, it came rather strangely, really, because my mother kissed us goodnight one night in bed, and she just happened to say that she'd always prayed that one of her children would be ordained, and I thought, well, how ridiculous! I mean, they all should be.
Yes.
And and I just knew that was, well, I'm going to be ordained. I didn't know about the other ones. And of course, eventually my younger brother was, and then my eldest brother was, and then a brother-in-law was ordained, and another brother who was doing social work, he was really making up his mind to apply to be ordained, and then he died from something else,
Yes.
But, so my mother got it right, probably. She probably
she
felt
did.
they should have all been ordained. And they all served the Lord.
Isn't that great?
In time. The older ones didn't sort of come back to the Lord until after my father was dead.
Right.
But I'm sure it was just an answer to prayer.
Yes.
Wonderful.
But then you got ordained and you
Yes.
became a curate at St Ebbs in Oxford.
Yes, it's very
And-
happy days with Basil Goff, who was the rector, and his wife, who has recently died last year, aged 97. The wife,
Really?
yes.
Wow.
Yes.
And it was there that you met a young lady called Mary,
Yes.
who became a friend, and then I gather you went on a shopping expedition. Tell us that story.
Well, I'll just tell you first of all why I was attracted to her, because I was in charge of the youth of the church, and young people are not always very good at getting out and speaking to the other young people. They've got their little group and they like to meet up with their friends, but they
Yes.
don't always notice. But Mary always noticed when a new person came through the door, and she would go and engage that person in conversation and sort of get them integrated. And I thought, gosh, she's a good soul. That's the sort of woman I really need for a wife. And so what was this, the engagement?
Did you go and buy some, you
yes.
said to her, I'm going to go and buy some plates or something?
Yes, I wanted some plates, I think, and stuff for the kitchen. And I thought, well, Mary's a woman, she will know about these things. So I said, would you come and help me?
Yes.
So I went into this shop, and a man came over and said, yes, sir, what can I do for you? And I said, well, I need some saucepans. He says, well, how many children are there? And I knew that I wanted to marry Mary, but I'd never proposed to her. But I just thought, because I have an unfortunate, mischievous twist in my sense of humour, I said to her, well, how many children would you like? And she said she left after she'd given me advice, and she said to her boss, she said, I don't know, it's a bit odd. I think I've just been proposed to, but I'm not sure.
Yes.
Yes,
well,
it wasn't the best thing. It wasn't the best way.
Well, it's original.
It was original,
That's
I have to
good.
say. Yes.
And of course, you did marry her.
I did marry her.
And
yes.
you've been married for how long?
We've been married for nearly 53 years.
Congratulations.
Yes, thank you.
So
yes.
you've got the silver medal and the gold medal.
Well, I think she deserves it, certainly. Yes, she's been very good and looked after me and given me 4 lovely daughters.
Isn't that lovely? Mm. You then moved from Oxford to another curacy.
Yes, in Surrey, called Wallington, St Patrick's Church. I was in charge of the daughter church. And they were wonderful. They really took me to their heart, took us both, really.
Yes.
And when we went out to the mission field, they were right behind us in supporting us and getting us equipment that we needed. And they were very, very good. We were privileged to be in both those churches.
And was the call to go to Chile clear to both you and to Mary?
Well, when I was a boy, we used to have lovely people coming to preach for my father because he was very missionary-minded. And I always used to feel rather sad that they would then go miles away to the other ends of the earth.
Yes.
When you thought they were so nice, you know, all these nice people seemed to go away. But gradually, through listening to them, God began to speak to me that that was a possibility, which was the last thing I wanted to do, because I loved Britain, I loved England, I loved my family, and I loved Suffolk, because I always think it's the Holy Land, you know.
Yes.
And I thought, well, it's a possibility, I may have to go, I don't want to go. And one thing I did check out with Mary before I made that rather unusual proposal was that to find out how she felt about the mission field. And
sure.
I said to her, well, I always feel that I have to be ready in case the Lord is going to call me,
yes.
but I sincerely hope he won't. And she felt exactly the same. So I thought, well,
You're on the same page.
Yes, we're on the same page. And so we went forward and got married on that basis. But then God definitely called us. I mean, we've had several extraordinary ways that God has intervened in our lives and called us to do strange things for him.
And you went to
we went.
Chile, and you had to learn the language?
I had to learn the language, and you go feeling rather arrogant, and after you've been there 6 months, you wonder how on earth the society ever selected you, because all the gunge comes to the surface. I think a lot of people think of going to the mission field and it's going to sort of make them holy.
Yes.
But my experience is you realise how unworthy you are, you know. And then, of course, it is quite a painful thing to be in another culture.
Sure.
And constantly making awful mistakes with saying the wrong things. For instance, I mean, you can't ever, if you made a mistake and then you say, I'm very embarrassed.
Yes.
That's another mistake, because you've got to say, I was very embarrassed with this. You must explain. Otherwise, they look at you because you'll tell them you're pregnant. And they think that's rather strange that you should be pregnant as a man, you know. And so you're always dropping bricks because you don't know. But you learn as you go along.
Absolutely.
You know.
So you did all sorts. I mean, you pastored a church. You're involved in church planting.
Yes.
So you're involved in local ministry, national ministry.
Yes, we were really. Well, we went out. I thought I was going to be teaching in a seminary.
Yes.
And I consulted with Dr. Packer.
Yes.
And he said, well, David, he said, I think with a good textbook you'll be all right.
Right.
So I went out with that confidence. But then that didn't materialise, and I landed with a missionary station with had about 25 outposts of churches right out in the Mundu,
Yes.
or El Campo, as they say out there. And it meant that I had to get there. The only way to get there was on horseback. And Mary is a champion. I mean, she used to win cups and things at Gymkhanas as a girl on horseback. But so I got her to give me some lessons, and she tried to get me to gallop.
Yes.
I said, well, wait a minute, I just want to get used to the gear change before I start galloping.
Yes. Yes.
Anyhow, it was quite an ordeal.
That was an
learning to ride.
adventure. Well, John Wesley did it on a horse, didn't he?
Yes. Well, I think he did better than me, because he composed some good sermons whilst he was on horseback. And
You were just trying to keep on.
Keep on and keep as pain-free as possible.
Yes. And then at St Andrews in Chorleywood, a fascinating season of life and ministry, both in the parish and beyond. And one significant landmark was you inviting John Wimber to come to the church. What made you invite John Wimber?
Well, because I came to St Andrews, and it had actually come into a charismatic renewal under my predecessor John Perry, who was baptized in the Spirit in the car park up there. And but John was a very, very loving man, and very gentle and kind and thoughtful, and he had taken them forward with lots of lovely speakers and people in renewal. But I think to a degree, the gifts of the Spirit operated in one or two home groups, and they weren't really...
Yes.
So I felt this isn't quite what I thought. But on the other hand, there were such lovely people, and he and Gay had done such a lovely work. I didn't want to change anything. And anyhow, I didn't know what... I mean, you're not going to change something unless the Lord is in it. But a friend of mine who had been in our team in Chile, named Eddie Gibbs.
Yes.
He was working for the Bible Society, and he came to live in Whitelands Avenue with his wife and family. And in the course of doing his doctoral studies, he was going to Fuller Seminary, and he met a man named John Wimber. And David Watson, who was at York, used to go over there and lecture every year. And Eddie told me that he had told David Watson to go and see this man, Wimber, who really knew something about church planting. He'd built a big church. And so David went, and he wrote back to Eddie, and he said, my ministry will never be the same again. Now, David Watson was a leader in renewal in Britain, highly respected. And I thought, wow, if David said his ministry would never be the same again, this man, Wimber, must have something to say. So I wrote to him and asked him to come to St Andrews. And it took quite a while before he replied, but he did. He said he was coming. And so I didn't consult with the PCC, the Church Council, because they would say, well, do you know him? I'd have to say, no. Have you heard him speak? No. Well, I mean, do you expect us to pay for his fare to come over from California? Well, I didn't. I thought, well, I just trust the Lord for a love offering at the door to cover his expenses. But then when he arrived at the railway station, I went to meet him, but he told me he'd got another 29 of his team were over here, and he put them up in a hotel in London, and they'd arranged for a brand new coach to bring them down to St Andrews for each day of the weekend. And I thought, oh my word. So I said to John, I think we've had a serious misunderstanding. I said, what's the matter? He said, well, I said, I invited you. I didn't realize that that meant inviting a team to come. And he says, well, does that matter? I said, no, it's wonderful. But I said, I don't know how on earth we're going to pay, because, I mean, I had invited them, and the PCC weren't involved. It wasn't their responsibility. And here was 30 people with their fares from California and back. And, oh, no, he said, don't worry about that. He said, that's our mission. We feel the Lord has called us. And all I say is, he said to me, if God blesses you, give it away.
Wonderful.
I signed up immediately because it let me off the hook with paying the money, and I agreed that we would give it away, not knowing what exactly God was going to give us, but very happy to make that commitment. And of course we were the thing about St Andrews was we had a wonderful team here.
Yes.
And Barry Kissel used to take faith-sharing teams away to parishes. So the blessing that we had affected all the people, himself and all the people in the team as well. So we were able to take it away. And Mary and I used to go out to churches as well. And so it began there was quite a buzz, really, in St Andrews.
And the visit of John Wimber, it made a big impact on the church and upon you.
It did, yes. Well, as I told him when he was leaving, I said, you've ruined my church. I said, well, it isn't really my church, but I mean, you've split the church in two. And there were people who were quite angry about it. But I said, well, I'm sorry that if it's upset you. But I said, I think it's the Lord. And we'll just have to wait and see.
Sure.
And several of those fathers came back, and after a few weeks, they said, we just want to apologise. Said, I've got a changed son, or I've got a changed daughter, you know.
Yes.
And God did wonderful things in that way, and in every way, really, because we suddenly saw the importance of, body ministry, as it were. That the gifts of the Spirit, that everybody could do something. It didn't mean everybody was in the healing team or everybody was prophetic, but everybody had a gift. And we needed to encourage people to find out what they were and to pray for them to get to stir up these gifts that they'd already got them. And it began to mean a lot more things began happening because a lot more people were doing stuff.
So you were seeing, is that when you began to see more people being healed?
Yes, we saw more people being healed. And then we had clergy who all wanted to come over and spend a couple of hours chatting.
Yes.
And after a while, I thought, gosh, I'm talking about it to everybody else, and we're not doing it. We're talking to other...
Yes.
So we had day conferences, and then eventually we started a conference up at...
Swanwick,
yes. We did 2 years there, but then I found that they still weren't doing it.
Yes.
Because their church didn't know what on earth they were talking about. These were the church leaders. We really need to get some their church members.
Yes, to come.
It seemed to me that, and somebody suggested we might go down to Shepton Mallet.
Yes.
And so we did. We started there, and it.
And that was your first new wine conference.
Yes, it was. And I wrote to because we had to put a deposit down.
Yes.
I mean, it's a much bigger deposit now we had to put down, but then we had to put a deposit. And I mean, finding something like £12,000 or £15,000, well, I mean, that was right out of my...
Of course.
John Wimber had given me seed money, about £3,000, and we got these conferences going up in Swanwick with that, and we'd costed it. He said, now what you need to do is to cost this properly. This is seed money. This is not money to give away to the poor, though that's important, but this is seed money to get things going so that when you finish, you then got money in hand to do another one.
Yes.
So that was a new thing for me too, because, you know, we never thought of charging Christians to come to things. But anyhow, we'd cost it. But I wrote to 10 different churches, and I said, could you lend me £1,000?
Yes.
And I'll pay it back after the conference. Got no step of faith there. But,
sure.
And 9 churches lent me £1,000. And with the 3,000, we managed, and what we'd made out of the other conferences, by trying to do them very carefully, we were able to cover the costs. But it was, I mean, we had about 450 people from St Andrews all helping us down there. And it was a terrific outlay, really, to go to a place like that.
Absolutely. And then, and obviously that's grown and grown year by year. And now there's new wine down south and north and in Ireland.
Yes, and in Scotland as well. It's called Clan Gathering in Scotland,
Yes.
and it's independent of us, but we share a lot with them, and we've been glad to try to help them.
And then also your youth leader, Mike Pilavacci,
Yes,
was overseeing the youth.
yes. Well, he was about the most troublesome youth leader I'd ever had.
Yes.
And he was just so cheeky, but I loved him. And he said yes, this was beginning something in Watford, really. He said he really felt that he'd given up being the youth worker, and we kept him on because he was so gifted.
Yes.
And on the staff. But he said, really, we need to take some of our young people to Watford and to get some of these kids on the streets. And so, well, I mean, in those days, it was considered very infra dig to go and
Yes.
do something in somebody else's parish. But it just did seem right. But as he'd been so cheeky to me, I looked very grim. And I said, well, it really sounds pretty mad to me.
Yes.
But, well, it could be God, and I think you better have a go. And Mike looked so relieved, you know, and I was very gratified that I had caused him such discomfort in that moment. But anyhow, it was God.
It was
I
God.
believed it was when
And-
he was telling me, you know.
And basically that was the birth of Soul
Yeah,
Survivor.
Well, that was of the church, you see.
the
and
church.
Then, but he did the youth work for New Wine.
Yes.
But then he felt that they'd be better if they did a separate Soul Survivor thing. So they did, and we sort of supported that. But then we felt actually they were doing a lot of things which seemed good for that.
Absolutely.
But we were, for the Soul Survivor, but we were financing it out of New Wine
Yes.
with money which we didn't have. So we thought really it would be better if they have their own council.
Yes,
I think I was a
absolutely.
member of it.
Yes.
But let them manage their own affairs, you know, which they did very well. And of course that's gone on wonderfully.
Of course.
Been an amazing blessing to so many people, including my own grandchildren, you know.
Yes. What do you feel? What's your sense at the moment, David, that the Spirit is doing or wanting to do?
I think we are probably coming for a time when the Spirit of God may move again in a major way, because when you look back on, you see there's a cycle in history. You know,
Sure.
there's sort of about 20 years cycle. People forget. You know, your grandchildren don't know who was John Wimber. I mean, what was all that about?
Yes.
I mean, my father had a tremendous blessing through a revival in 1921 in Lowestoft
Yes.
in Suffolk, which none of you people have ever heard about.
Yes.
But, you know, God is always doing it. So probably we may be coming back for another crisis, but at the same time God is working on. And I think during this process time, I mean, I'm writing a book on, it's an ongoing thing, but it's really pathways to ongoing renewal.
Yes.
Through prayer, really.
Yes.
And I think that we all have a lot to learn from prayer.
Of course.
And I don't know whether evangelicals have been very good at teaching about prayer. We teach people that they need to do it, but we don't
Yes.
talk a lot about people's struggles in it.
No.
And but it seems to me that it's the prayer. That's what I always felt about St Andrew's here, that we had an early morning prayer meeting at 7 o'clock every morning, and I always made a point of being there. But of course, my children had grown up. I think it's
Yes.
more difficult if you're the leader and you've got younger children. They've got to got ready for church and for school. But you know, it seemed to me that just we didn't know what we were going to pray for. We just went to meet with the Lord and try to be open to God and whatever He wanted to tell us, you know. And it was very
Absolutely.
free and relaxed. But we always closed on the dot at quarter to 8, so business people could get up to town if they wanted to go. We never wanted to make anybody feel bad if they couldn't make that time. But I think it was the prayer that gave us the vital link, and things began to happen.
Yes.
They just happened. I mean, it seemed good unto us and to the Lord that this should happen. We just said, God bless you. Things that we hadn't planned. I came to St Andrews, and there were a lot of very high-powered business people. They wanted me to spell out a 5-year plan. Well, if you'd lived in South America, you'd know you could never have a 5-year plan for
No.
anything because
Yes.
nothing ever worked out as you planned. And I had
Yes.
that kind of framework when I came back here. I was terrified of having a 5-year plan because I thought if the Lord does something next week, I want to go and do what the Lord does, whatever our 5-year plan has been. So I'm not saying you shouldn't think ahead,
Of course.
but as for having it a plan, you might get it thrown back into your face. I think we need to be very open. I felt the Lord was telling us to do that, you know. But I think you've got to be aware and not upset if people come and tell you, perhaps as the leader, that they thought you were wrong.
Yes.
You shouldn't have done that, and you might have been. None of us are infallible. I haven't yet made it yet for infallibility.
Not yet.
No, I don't think we ever will be. But not this side of glory, I'm afraid. But I don't know whether we will be. I suppose we will.
Yeah.
The other side, when we are with the Lord forever.
And the generations are continuing. And in your own family, David, a number of your children are in ministry, grandchildren.
Well, I'm very proud that one has just gone to help to plant a vineyard up in Northern Ireland. He's
Yes.
got married. I'm very proud that another one is doing a doctorate in Cambridge on prayer,
Yes.
which I think is a wonderful thing, very necessary.
Yes.
Yes, I mean...
And you've got a son-in-law and your daughter pastor a church in Nottingham, and
Yes.
another son-in-law's a bishop in
Yes,
Coventry.
God has blessed us with some faithful people. We've had another daughter who was involved in the 9 o'clock service and got very hurt by it.
Yes.
And yes, God is good, as they say
God
in
is
Africa,
good.
all the time.
All the time, God is good. You've sowed seed and you've seen fruit. In your
Yes.
in this book, you've written a number of books, David. This book, Living at the Edge. Why did you choose that title?
Well, I was brought up at the edge in Suffolk. It's on the edge of Britain. I went to Chile, which is right out there. You're on the edge there, you know, one step further and you fall in, you know.
Yes.
And then I came to Chorleywood, and I was living at the edge of the diocese here.
Yes.
And I felt that what I was doing was not, although we were often interviewed when I was the vicar here, weren't we, upsetting the bishop and all that. I said, well, we love our bishop, and we're trying to bless him. I know he doesn't like it, but he's got the central organisation, has got to work within certain rules, but we want to bless him with new church life, and he can't do this, but we hope that we believe it's God, and God is breaking up some things and
Sure.
creating new life. And I think so that's why I felt I was living at the edge. And I don't mind living at the edge.
No.
As
And
long as
this is your autobiography.
Yes, it was well, I wrote it originally because I wanted my grandchildren to have a story, because I think that identity is rather important. I mean, our identity in Christ, but I think I've always been interested in the story of my father and grandparents
Yes.
and things, and I wanted them to have, and we've been so blessed. But then they said, well, you should get it published. So we tried, and it was published, and that's it.
Yeah. Well, I was intrigued to read that in the preface you wrote a scripture from Proverbs: "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight." Why did you choose that verse?
Well, because that's always been a key verse in my life. I mean, I thought somebody shared it with me once, and I looked at it and I thought, well, that's what I want, you know. And I think other people might not think my paths have been straight, but they were as straight as I could make them.
Absolutely.
Yes. No, the Lord, that's a great trust in the Lord with all your heart.
Well,
Lean not to your own understanding. God does move in mysterious ways, and they're all good.
David, I want to say thank you because you've influenced my life, and I do want to thank you that over the years that you've impacted me and encouraged me and helped me, and I've always appreciated the opportunities I've had to come and ask you questions and ask you for advice, and today has been great. Thank you very much, David, for talking to us.